In today's fast-paced world, where everyone is constantly juggling responsibilities, many people find it challenging to carve out time for a personal life. Online dating has long been normalized as a way to meet potential partners. Sometimes, these connections blossom into meaningful relationships, even leading to marriage and family. However, lurking beneath the surface are risks far greater than a broken heart. Lori Leonard, a single mother, was one of those hopefuls searching for love online. She dreamed of finding a man who would accept her and embrace her children as his own. Tragically, her story took a dark turn. When Lori suddenly vanished without a trace, the investigation faced overwhelming challenges due to a lack of evidence. Authorities knew that finding her was the only way to uncover the truth. Months later, their persistence paid off when a critical clue, quite literally, surfaced. Lori Leonard, a single mother in search of happiness. Lori Ann Leonard grew up in a small Kansas town, raised in a modest household alongside her older sister, Jennifer. The two siblings were incredibly close, especially after their father left the family while they were still in school. Their mother worked tirelessly to support her daughters, and the three of them formed a tight-knit bond. After high school, Lori became involved with a boyfriend she had dated since her senior year. In 1998, she gave birth to a baby boy, Jake. Unfortunately, the relationship didn't last. The father showed little interest in raising their son and offered no financial support. A year and a half later, Lori entered another relationship with someone she believed to be reliable and caring. Things seemed promising until she became pregnant again. By 2000, Lori gave birth to her second son, Bryson. Shortly afterward, her partner disappeared, unwilling to take on the responsibilities of fatherhood. Unable to attend college due to her early pregnancies, Lori struggled to find stable employment. She took on various jobs as a courier, waitress, and cashier to make ends meet. Determined to create a better life for her family, Lori decided to leave her hometown and move to Albany, New York. She rented a small apartment and took a job at a casino, hoping the change would provide a fresh start. However, life in Albany was far from easy. Working late nights left Lori with no one to care for her young sons. Without family nearby and unable to afford childcare, she realized the situation was unsustainable. After much deliberation, she decided to move again, this time to join her sister Jennifer. Jennifer had relocated years earlier to Chittenango, a quiet town in Madison County, New York. Living in a suburban home with her 15-year-old son Justin, Jennifer found the slower pace of small-town life appealing. She had long encouraged Lori to move closer, offering her a supportive environment to rebuild her life. In 2005, Lori Leonard moved to Chittenango, New York, settling into a spacious two-story home just a few blocks away from her sister Jennifer's house. Each of Lori's sons now had their own room. The family had a backyard where the boys could play with their dog and the kids could walk to school. Lori also found a job as a waitress at a local cafe with daytime hours, allowing her to be home every evening with her boys. Lori was a cheerful, lively, and friendly person. She quickly bonded with her new neighbors and coworkers, all of whom spoke highly of her. Whenever she needed help, her sister Jennifer and her teenage nephew Justin were always ready to lend a hand. At the same time, Lori continued her search for love online, believing she would soon meet someone who would love her and care for her boys as if they were his own. She created profiles on several dating websites and actively went on dates, but luck hadn't been on her side. Jennifer, however, was skeptical about online dating and often reminded Lori to be cautious and selective. A mysterious disappearance. On Wednesday, May 4th, 2005, Lori asked Jennifer to watch her sons so she could take a trip to Albany. Lori said she needed to pick up some belongings from her old home and planned to meet a friend who had promised her and the boys tickets to a New York Yankees game. Knowing she wouldn't be able to complete everything in one day, Lori told Jennifer she would stay overnight at a hotel. She assured her sister she would be back in the morning to take her sons to school and then head to her cafe job by 9 a.m. The next morning, around 8:30 a.m., Jennifer called Lori to check on her and make sure everything was fine. To her surprise, Lori's phone was turned off and she didn't answer. Lori didn't show up as planned, which made Jennifer increasingly worried. Jennifer dropped the boys off at school and decided to stop by the cafe to see if Lori had gone straight to work. But when she got there, the cafe staff said Lori hadn't shown up for her shift and hadn't called to let anyone know, a behavior that was completely out of character for her. Since Jennifer had to get to work, she asked her son Justin to go to Lori's house to check if she had returned. When Justin arrived, he saw Lori's car parked in the driveway. The keys were still in the lock, which seemed strange. Assuming Lori was home, but possibly busy or resting, he knocked on the door and called out for her, but there was no response. Justin walked around to the back door and found it unlocked. Entering the house, he immediately noticed that something was wrong. The family's dog was on the first floor, clearly hungry, and had torn into a bag of dog food. This was unusual, as Lori always fed the dog before leaving, and if she had returned, it would have been her first priority. Hoping to find a reasonable explanation, Justin went upstairs. What he saw there only deepened the mystery. Lori's bed was unmade, and the blanket was missing. Her shoes, which she wore often, were in unusual spots. One was by the front door, and the other was on the bed. These strange details made it clear that something was not right. Justin immediately called his mother to report what he had found. Jennifer, alarmed by her sister's sudden disappearance and silence, contacted the police to file a missing person report. Unfortunately, the family had little concrete information to offer. They didn't know the name of the man Lori was supposed to meet. However, Jennifer mentioned a suspicious detail. The man had arranged to meet Lori at a hotel. Since he lived in Albany, he could have easily given her the tickets in a public place, like a cafe or even on the street. The meeting seemed more like a private date, especially since Lori had planned to stay overnight. Jennifer also advised police to question Lori's ex-boyfriend, 29-year-old Sean Doyle, who had helped her during her recent move. Though the two had broken up months earlier, they remained on friendly terms, and Sean appeared to hope for reconciliation. Jennifer had spoken with him on the day Lori disappeared. Sean admitted he had seen Lori the night before, lending her his van, and said he was shocked to hear she had gone missing. The investigation begins. When investigators arrived at Lori's home, they found no signs of forced entry or struggle. Everything in the house appeared to be in its usual place. Nothing seemed to be stolen, and there were no visible bloodstains. However, Lori's purse, phone, credit cards, and identification were missing. While this could indicate she took them with her when she left, her abandoned car, with the keys still in the ignition, suggested otherwise. It seemed unlikely that she had left voluntarily. By the time the search began, Lori had been out of contact for over 24 hours. Her family emphasized that she was a devoted mother who would never abandon her boys. Furthermore, her credit cards hadn't been used, and her phone remained off. All these details, combined with the abandoned car, led investigators to suspect foul play. While experienced detectives understood the grim possibilities, they refrained from sharing these concerns with Lori's family at that early stage. Interviews with neighbors and a search for potential witnesses turned up no leads. No one had seen or heard anything unusual, and there were no reports of unfamiliar people or vehicles in the area. Still, Lori's disappearance caused a stir in the small town, quickly becoming the most talked about event. Rumors began to swirl about a possible predator targeting women. Recognizing the growing tension, authorities knew they needed to solve the case quickly to prevent widespread panic. The first suspect. As is often the case in investigations like this, the first person of interest was Lori's ex-boyfriend, Sean Doyle. He had been with her the day before her disappearance and might have been the last person to see her alive. Sean's background raised further concerns. He had a history of criminal activity, including theft, illegal possession of firearms, and involvement with banned substances. He had also faced accusations of aggressive behavior toward former girlfriends. Investigators considered him a strong suspect due to his history and recent contact with Lori. According to Jennifer, Lori met Sean Doyle online. Initially, he appeared to be a reliable, family-oriented man, claiming he dreamed of having a family and was ready to be a father figure for Jake and Bryson. However, once their relationship moved offline, Lori realized that Sean's carefully crafted persona didn't match reality. He was rough-mannered, used banned substances, and refused to leave behind his criminal activities. Their relationship lasted less than 6 months and ended when Lori decided to make significant changes in her life. Sean, however, didn't want to let go and suggested staying friends, though it was clear he was using this as an excuse to monitor and control her. Neighbors frequently saw Sean at Lori's house during her move and found him unsettling. He seemed to go out of his way to portray himself as a dangerous figure, often wearing a black leather jacket adorned with metal studs, skull-patterned bandanas, and a pair of heavy handcuffs hanging from his belt. With his demeanor and appearance, Sean fit the profile of someone capable of harming Lori, making him the detective's first priority. Questioning Sean Doyle. Sean didn't appear surprised when detectives visited him. He remained calm and cooperative, answering their questions without hesitation. He admitted to seeing Lori the day before her disappearance, saying he had helped her move some belongings. Afterward, he claimed he went straight home and went to bed. However, his alibi couldn't be confirmed, as he hadn't made any stops or interacted with anyone on his way home, and he lived alone. When Sean realized he was the primary, and at that time the only suspect, he grew defensive. He told detectives they were barking up the wrong tree and suggested they track down the man Lori had planned to meet in Albany. He also made disparaging remarks about his former girlfriend, calling her flighty and overly interested in men. According to him, their breakup was due to her alleged infidelity, insisting he was the one who ended the relationship, not Lori. Before the questioning ended, Sean provided a potential lead. He mentioned that Lori had met the man offering the Yankees tickets while working at a casino before her move to Chittenango. Sean speculated that her former co-workers might know more about the man in question. The second suspect. Following up on Sean's tip, investigators asked Jennifer for details about the casino where Lori had worked. They headed to the establishment, where employees were shocked to hear about Lori's disappearance. One waitress recalled a regular patron who was a Yankees fan and had shown a particular interest in Lori. The man, identified as Randolph Shark, was a wealthy and well-known local businessman. He was reportedly quite attentive to Lori, often trying to win her over. While some colleagues suspected a secret romance, Lori never confirmed such rumors. Once detectives had Shark's name, it didn't take long to locate his home address. They planned to question him immediately as his actions raised red flags. Why had he chosen to arrange a meeting in a hotel rather than in a public place or send the tickets by mail? Investigators wondered if the hotel meeting had been a trap and the tickets merely a pretext to lure Lori into a dangerous situation. Randolph Shark lived in an opulent 3-story home in the city's most exclusive neighborhood. When police arrived at his door, he seemed surprised but composed. However, when officers explained the purpose of their visit, his demeanor shifted to unease. Shark stepped outside, firmly closing the door behind him and refusing to let the officers enter his home. He assured them, though, that he was willing to answer their questions. As it turned out, Randolph had been married for many years and had 3 children. However, he had a habit of engaging in brief affairs with younger women, something his wife was entirely unaware of. Desperate to keep his indiscretions a secret, Shark confessed to having a short-term relationship with Lori. He begged the detectives not to reveal this information, fearing it would destroy his family. Randolph admitted that he had been seeing Lori in secret for about 2 months and had indeed promised her tickets to a Yankees game for her boys. The hotel meeting was arranged so they could have a romantic evening together. According to him, he planned to return home afterward while Lori stayed at the hotel overnight to avoid a late-night drive. However, Randolph claimed that Lori never showed up at the hotel. He said he waited for hours, trying to call her multiple times, but she didn't answer. Assuming she had either changed her mind or had a change of plans, he eventually sent her several text messages before leaving the hotel and heading home. Surveillance footage from the hotel corroborated parts of Randolph's story. Cameras captured him entering his room and leaving a few hours later. But Lori was never seen on the premises. During his time there, he made 5 phone calls and sent over a dozen text messages to her, none of which received a response. The evidence suggested that Lori never made it to the hotel to meet Randolph. Moreover, her car wasn't captured on any of the traffic cameras on routes leading to Albany. This raised the possibility that she never left Chittenango in the first place. Given this new information, Randolph was released, as his alibi now seemed credible. Nevertheless, detectives weren't ready to remove him entirely from their list of suspects. The third suspect. A week had passed since Lori's disappearance, and investigators were no closer to solving the case. Her loved ones clung to hope that she might still return safely, though deep down, they feared the worst as more time passed. Jennifer mentioned that Lori had been actively searching for love online and suggested that detectives examine her messages on dating websites. She recalled that about a month before her disappearance, Lori had met a man through one of these platforms. While they had gone on a few dates, Lori quickly realized the relationship wasn't for her. However, the man wasn't willing to let her go so easily. He had fallen for Lori and was determined to win her over. This lead caught the detectives' attention. They began meticulously reviewing Lori's online conversations and found that she had been communicating with 3 men in recent weeks. Of those, she had met only one in person, a man named Todd Owens. Todd had claimed he was serious about building a relationship, but judging by Lori's abrupt shift in tone after their date, it was clear she wasn't interested in pursuing things further. Detectives suspected that Todd might have had difficulty accepting her rejection. Todd Owens wasn't just persistent. His behavior bordered on obsessive. He bombarded Lori with messages, called her constantly, and practically begged her for another date. In one of his last texts, he even joked, though in poor taste, that he might harm himself if she didn't give him another chance. But could this man, so consumed by his feelings, have harmed the woman he was so fixated on simply because she rejected him? On the surface, Todd appeared to be a charming and attractive man who was popular with women. Yet something about Lori captivated him in a way no one else had. He quickly became enamored with her, even fantasizing about marriage and taking on the role of a father to her sons. When detectives showed up at Todd's home to question him about Lori's disappearance, he seemed genuinely shocked, upset, and even scared. Todd admitted he had been deeply infatuated with Lori, perhaps even overly so, and acknowledged that his intensity might have pushed her away. After their first date, Lori texted him to say that things wouldn't work out between them. But instead of accepting her decision, Todd saw it as a challenge. To Todd, Lori was the ideal woman, someone he believed he could build a stable and lasting relationship with. However, she didn't feel the same way and had been upfront about it. Despite her clear rejection, Todd continued to pursue her, hoping to convince her to meet him again. But based on their text exchanges, it seemed that another meeting never happened, much to Todd's disappointment. Todd's obsession with Lori was undeniable, and he didn't try to hide it. However, he had a solid alibi for the day of her disappearance. He had been at work all morning and hadn't left the office, something his coworkers, at least 10 of them, could confirm. After work, he went directly to a bar to celebrate a friend's birthday, a gathering attended by dozens of people who could vouch for his presence. With such a strong alibi, Todd was removed from the list of suspects. A shocking discovery. Nearly 3 months had passed since Lori's disappearance. Jennifer had taken custody of her nephews, and the boys were now living in her home. Deep down, Jennifer feared she might never see her sister again, though she clung to a sliver of hope that Lori would return. The investigation, however, had stalled completely. No new evidence or suspects had surfaced, leaving the case at a standstill. Then, in late July, everything changed, delivering a devastating blow to any remaining hope of a positive outcome. On the early morning of Sunday, July 24, 2005, a terrified man called the police to report a horrifying discovery in a nearby body of water. The caller was a local resident who had decided to spend his day off fishing along the Champlain Canal, which connects the Hudson River to the southern end of Lake Champlain. He had hoped for a quiet morning surrounded by nature's tranquility. As he cast his line, the man decided to take a short walk along the bank. That's when he noticed something unusual. Just a few yards away, tangled in the shoreline's tall grass, was a large toolbox floating near the water's surface. It appeared to have been carried there by the current and had gotten stuck in the vegetation. The toolbox floating in the canal looked substantial. Hoping it might contain something valuable or useful, the fisherman decided to retrieve it. He hooked the box and started pulling it toward the shore. However, whatever was inside was extremely heavy, forcing the man to wade into the water to drag it out. After considerable effort, the fisherman finally managed to bring the box onto dry land. Intrigued, he began examining the rusty latches, working to pry them open. When he succeeded and lifted the lid, he recoiled in horror. Inside was the partially decomposed body of a young woman, wrapped in a blood-stained white blanket. The elderly fisherman was so shocked by the gruesome discovery that he nearly suffered a heart attack. Panicking, he abandoned everything and ran to call the police. Overwhelmed, he could barely articulate what he had seen, repeatedly shouting that he had found a woman's body inside the box. Examining the evidence, law enforcement quickly arrived at the scene, securing the box and transporting it to a forensic lab. The remains were sent for an autopsy, though identifying the body proved challenging due to its prolonged exposure to water and advanced decomposition. However, fingerprint analysis and dental records soon confirmed that the victim was Lori Leonard, who had been missing for nearly 3 months. The box also contained Lori's belongings, including her purse, ID, credit cards, and cell phone. Investigators concluded that the attacker had taken these items to create the illusion that Lori had left voluntarily. The condition of the victim's body provided further horrifying details. Lori was unclothed from the waist down and appeared to have suffered a physical assault before her death. However, obtaining DNA evidence to identify the perpetrator was impossible due to the body's extended time in the water. Her cut-up pants were found inside the box, suggesting the attacker had acted hastily, cutting off her clothing rather than removing it entirely. Lori's hands and feet were bound with metal handcuffs, and her mouth and nose were sealed with duct tape. A black bandana, used as a gag, was found inside her mouth. There were several cuts on her body, but none were fatal. Defensive wounds were visible on her hands, and a bruise near her left eye indicated she had sustained trauma while still alive. Despite these injuries, none of them directly caused her death. The autopsy revealed that Lori had died from asphyxiation. Since no water was found in her lungs, it was clear she had been killed before her body was placed in the canal. The toolbox also contained 2 bags of construction sand, likely intended as ballast to weigh the box down and keep it submerged. However, one of the bags had torn open, allowing most of its contents to wash away. This caused the makeshift grave to drift until it eventually became lodged in the shoreline vegetation. A key witness and irrefutable evidence. When news of the horrifying discovery aired during the evening broadcast, a woman named Sydney contacted the police with a potentially crucial lead. She claimed to have seen the toolbox in question before, and she suspected she might know who was responsible for the crime. Sydney identified herself as a neighbor of Sean Doyle, who had previously been on the list of suspects. She explained that Sean had often carried a similar large toolbox in the bed of his pickup truck, but it mysteriously disappeared several months ago. Sydney recounted how her husband had casually asked Sean about the toolbox one day, wondering where it had gone. Sean hesitated at first, but then replied that he had gotten rid of it because he no longer needed it. Although the response struck the couple as odd, they didn't think much of it at the time. It wasn't until they saw the evening news segment about the body found in the toolbox that the pieces clicked into place. Since Sean was already a person of interest, and the canal where the box was found was only a few miles from his home, detectives acted quickly. They arrived at Sean's house, but he appeared prepared for their arrival. He had already hired a defense attorney and refused to cooperate with the investigation, invoking his right to remain silent. Mounting evidence. Despite Sean's refusal to cooperate, the case against him quickly began to build. Police arrested him and secured a warrant to search his property. Detectives also started interviewing his neighbors, hoping to uncover additional information. Several of Sean's neighbors recalled seeing the toolbox in his truck bed in the past and identified it with certainty from photographs. They also mentioned that the black bandana found in the victim's mouth looked remarkably similar to the ones Sean often wore. During the search of Sean's home, investigators uncovered 2 more pairs of metal handcuffs identical to the ones used to restrain Lori. Witnesses confirmed that Sean was known for carrying handcuffs with him wherever he went. Police also discovered a large collection of bandanas in his possession, matching the one found on the victim. The most damning evidence, however, was found in a shed on Sean's property. Inside, detectives located several bags of construction sand purchased from the same store as the sandbags found in the toolbox. This discovery strongly tied Sean to the crime scene and further corroborated the witness accounts. The trial and verdict. Despite the overwhelming amount of evidence against Sean Doyle, much of it was circumstantial. Investigators were unable to recover any DNA linking him to the crime scene, and Doyle consistently denied any involvement. His attorney had meticulously crafted a strong defense strategy, which complicated the prosecution's case. However, a critical piece of evidence emerged: a broken key found under the seat of Doyle's pickup truck. The number etched on the key matched the lock number on the toolbox recovered from the canal. Investigators theorized that the lock had been broken for some time, which explained why Doyle had only secured the toolbox with its latches. It appeared he had forgotten about the misplaced key, leaving it behind as a damning piece of evidence. Doyle never confessed to the crime, and reconstructing the sequence of events was a complex process. Prosecutors argued that Doyle had approached Lori in an attempt to rekindle their relationship but became enraged when she rejected him. They believed that Lori was leaving her home, possibly heading to meet someone else, when Doyle confronted her. Enraged, he likely coerced her back inside the house where the attack occurred. According to the prosecution's theory, Doyle assaulted Lori, using a bandana as a gag that ultimately caused her death by asphyxiation. He then wrapped her body in a blanket and carried it out through the back door, placing it in his truck. To create the illusion that Lori had left of her own accord, Doyle took her purse, phone, and identification. He later placed the body in the toolbox, added sandbags, and disposed of it in the canal. The investigation took nearly 4 months to compile all the evidence and prepare the case for trial. The hearings began in late November 2005 and were conducted publicly. Sean Doyle faced charges of premeditated homicide and evidence tampering. The trial concluded in December 2006 after nearly a year of legal proceedings. The jury found Doyle guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving no less than 30 years.